Okay, question 17. At a honey factory, the honey dispensing machine is designed to fill each bottle with masses that are normally distributed with a mean of 503.5 grams and a standard deviation of 17.2 grams. A company roughly samples bottles of honey so that the probability of the mean mass being greater than 500 grams is equal to 0.9. Determine the sample size. Now, this is an important question because this is a very common trick that I've seen in the QCAA exams, where you'll need to first determine the z-score. Then you'll need to identify that this is the population standard deviation, meaning that we're going to have to find our sample standard deviation by doing 17.2 divided by the square root of how many people are in the sample. Now, we don't know that part, and we won't know this part, which means that we'll have to use another piece of information to solve for it. Now, that other piece of information, something we've been looking at in methods, where our z-score is equal to the mean that we have minus the population mean over our deviation. So our sample deviation in this case, which is going to be this part here. So everything's going to come together in this equation at the end. All right, but we need to find those parts first. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to find our z-score. Now, if I think about this as a picture, there's 500. We want it to be larger than 500. So we've got a lower, we've got an upper, we've got an area. So let's go to our calculators. We're going to go to menu, statistics. So we've got a lower, we've got an upper. Let's just chuck some stuff in and see what happens. Now, we've got the area too, which means that the statistic that we want to use is going to be distribution normal, inverse normal. Now, we're looking for it to be, if you think about my drawing, it's going to be going right. The area is 0.9. And we're going to leave our deviation and our mean as 0 and 1. Okay, so the number I'm going to take is negative 1.2816. So z equals negative 1.2816. All right, so now I'm going to start putting everything together in our formula. So this is the one we're going to be filling in. I now have a z-score. We've got this, which is this number, the 500 that we're testing, minus our population mean here, 503.5, all over our sample deviation, 17.2 over the square root of n. Now, this has everything except that, so I'm going to chuck that whole thing in the calculator with solve n at the start. Okay, and don't forget your comma, whatever letter you've used. In the calculator, I would use X. So once you do that, you'll end up with n is equal to 39.69. Therefore, n is equal to 40. So the smallest sample that the company could possibly take is 40 samples. Okay, next we're going to look at B. So a worker at the factory claims that the result of the sample from 17A would not be valid as the mass of honey dispensed into each bottle cannot be assumed to be normally distributed. Now, when we're looking at central limit theory, we assume that if n is greater than 30, that's a large sample. So we can assume normal distribution. Now, that doesn't actually mean that all of the data has been normally distributed, like the actual individuals, but it means that the individual means that would have been calculated end up being normally distributed. So, therefore, the claim is not reasonable. So in this question, you would get 1 mark for identifying that the claim is not reasonable. This part here, you get 1 mark for making this statement. If we go back up and we talk about where your marks would have come from in this section, you would get 1 mark for identifying this information, all of this, to calculate your z-score, 1 mark for actually calculating your z-score, 1 mark for getting an expression with n in it, 1 mark for this part, and then 1 mark for the rounded answer. So be cautious about what parts you think you're skipping based on where your marks are going to be allocated.